The first session will be with Clay Olsen. Clay Olsen is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit organization Fight the New Drug. Fight the New Drug really is a big proponent of bringing awareness about the dangers of pornography. So I'll turn it over to Clay.
Thank you guys so much. It's a great crowd. You guys are from all over the place, and it's so inspiring to see so many come together to talk about some challenges and solutions to some serious problems of our society. Now, I only have the next 4 hours with you, so we're going to kind of move quickly. I really wish we had that kind of time because there's that much to talk about, but sadly I don't. And so we're going to kind of move real quickly and talk about some of these issues. The bottom line, if you get nothing from my presentation, I hope that you leave this room and this conference with the understanding that pornography is harmful and that research is proving it. That part is actually new, that last part, research is proving. We didn't always know that. We didn't always have the information we now have about addiction and about pornography. In fact, if we look back in our history, we've had to learn the hard way with a lot of different stuff. We haven't always known what we now know. Check out this ad for cocaine toothache drops for children back in the late 1800s. How many of you have ever had a toothache in your life? Raise your hand. If that's, yeah, all of us, right? No fun. Can you imagine going to your doctor today and going, "Doc, I got this problem. It's killing me. Please help me." And he's like, "I got just the thing." Pulls out some cocaine, drops on the table. He's like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to love this. It's going to make you forget the pain. In fact, it's going to make you even forget you have teeth," right? No. We wouldn't see that today. Why not? Because we finally figured out that cocaine was super harmful, super addictive, and that it should cost more than 15 cents, right? We learn. We progress, we move on. It happened yet again in our history with alcohol. You see, this is an ad for mothers with newborn babies, telling them that they should drink more alcohol so that the benefits would pass on through their body and on to the nursing child. Oops. And they're still among us today. No, but this is a problem, right? We finally figured out that it was a bad thing. And guess what? Science, this is the case with anything. Science always has to catch up with truth. That's just the way it goes. Science always has to catch up with truth. And then society has to catch up with science. And it happened yet again in our history back with tobacco. You remember this. This was a little bit more public. Doctors used to prescribe smoking tobacco as a way to soothe the nerves and clean out the lungs. A third grader could tell us otherwise today, but we didn't know any better back then. In fact, let's stay on tobacco for just 2 seconds because this is interesting. How many of you know this guy right here? Dr. Raymond Pearl. Anybody? I've been doing this presentation for a long time. I've never had a hand raised, so you're in the majority. Don't feel bad. This guy's pretty important to our history. This guy's pretty important. He was working at Johns Hopkins University in 1938. Okay, and he was the first guy to discover and make a connection through his research that smoking tobacco could lead to lung cancer and a shortened lifespan. Whoa. I mean, who was smoking at the time? Everybody. And nobody was aware of this. And so what happened immediately after? Well, of course, there was statues erected in his honor. There was confetti and billboards and campaigns, right? No. Of course not. The tobacco industry squashed his research, and it never saw the light of day during his lifetime. He died 4 years later. Nearly 15 years later, Reader's Digest came out with an article called "Cancer by the Carton," and that was the first public attack on the tobacco industry, and that launched a 40-year debate, a public debate as to whether or not it was indeed harmful. And now we know better, right? Now, science has not only caught up with truth, but society has caught up with science. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because that we are in a similar learning experience in our history that you're a part of, that we will look back on regarding the topic of pornography. We now know through studies and research that pornography is impacting us in 3 main ways. It's impacting our brains, neurologically, our hearts, our ability to connect and love, and our world, our overarching society. Now, and research is proving this. So, we don't have to kind of know the research. We don't need the peer-reviewed data. We don't need a PhD to kind of see just how much this is impacting our society. We can see it in the articles that are being written, in the news. We can see it just how much This generation is facing this issue. Your generation and those younger are dealing with this issue to an intensity and scale never before seen in the history of the world. Never before seen. And it's a massive challenge that we're facing. And we're just now opening our eyes to kind of realize, okay, now what are the effects? It's no longer kind of like, we used to kind of think, well, this is just a harmless pastime. You know, some people thought it was no big deal. It was part of growing up. Some people always had the kind of thought that it was wrong, it was bad, and you shouldn't do it. But it was often kind of divided into this personal opinion debate. And now science has caught up with truth. But I want you guys to understand what that science is and understand kind of what that is in brain, the heart, and the world. So for the next little while, I want to kind of dive into that, if you don't mind. Now, we get, at our organization, tens of thousands of emails from people all across the world telling us about their story, their challenges, their struggle. And I've just selected a few to share with you today. Here's a teen that emailed us not long ago, said that my life now would have been much different if my father had understood that pornography was a true addiction and that just stop wasn't an option. You know, we used to face it that way. Stop, quit it, don't do it, pervert. How could you? And now, the more we understand about the brain, the more we understand that this is a true addiction in Stephen's words. So let's talk about that, because many of you might be sitting there thinking, now wait a second, I don't smoke it, I don't drink it, I don't stick it in my body. Like, how is this like a drug? We see in each one of our brains, we have what we call a reward pathway. This reward pathway is pretty important. When we do something good, something that we like and enjoy, pleasure chemicals are released into between these neuroconnectors, and it makes us feel good, and it makes us want to repeat that behavior. For me, music's a big part of my life. I love listening to it on a rare occasion, even performing it. And in those moments, pleasure chemicals like dopamine are released in between these neuroconnectors, and I'm like, this is fun, this is good, I like this, I want to continue this. This is amplified with things that sustain and promote life, like things like eating food and procreation. Now, if we think about the things we like, for instance, what do you like to do? Right here in the front. So you love playing soccer. When you're playing soccer, these pleasure chemicals are released in between your neuroconnectors. You're like, this is good, this is fun, I like this. I want to continue to do this. What do you like to do right here with the beard? Dancing? Sorry, what was that? Ballet dancing. So when you're ballet dancing, these pleasure chemicals are releasing. You're like, this is so amazing. I can't wait. No judgments. This is normal. This is how we kind of organize. This is how we decide what we like and what we don't like. Here's the trick. This part of the brain can be hijacked. Okay? So when we participate in addictive behaviors or put addictive substances into our body, this part of the brain is hijacked. And it releases those chemicals. It gets duped into releasing those chemicals in an unhealthy way and in unhealthy quantities, to the point where the brain literally starts to rewire itself, change and alter. And over time, the things that you used to like to do, like playing soccer and dancing or surfing, no longer cut it. They don't release enough. So to just feel normal, you need more of it, more often, and a more hardcore version. That is what addiction is. That is what addiction is. And here's the thing. We've also learned that through serious cases of addiction, that the frontal lobes of the brain can actually decrease in size. Now, I just got back from Berlin. I was in Berlin meeting with Dr. Simone Kuhn out there, who is one of the world's leading neurologists on the topic she's done a lot of research on how pornography and viewing explicit material is impacting our brains, quite literally, physiologically, our brains. Oh, I got a little clip of her, and sadly I just got back, so I wasn't able to kind of edit the interview that I captured, which was in English. So the one I captured here is in German. Any Germans here? Anyone speak the German? Wow, okay, so you guys are going to understand her. Everyone else, read, okay? So here we go, check it out.
Je mehr Pornografie konsumiert wird, desto geringer ist eine Struktur innerhalb des Belohnungssystems, die nennt sich Striatum oder Caudatum. Und das könnte sozusagen heißen, dass wenn man mehr Pornografie konsumiert, diese Struktur vielleicht schrumpft und dann dadurch dazu führt, dass man immer mehr braucht und immer krassere Stimuli braucht, um die gleiche Belohnung zu haben.
Now, it's kind of hard to hear and small to read. So bottom line, what she said is that over time, the individuals that consume it, even casual viewers of pornography, they found an actual measurable decrease in the striatum of the brain, found in the reward pathway of the brain. So an actual physiological decrease in the brain. We asked her to send us a brain scan of what that looks like to kind of have that shrinking of the brain. This is what she sent. You have to squint. You can kind of see, though, just how much. This is just kind of, serious stuff. No, for real. The frontal lobes of the brain are located where? Just like the name suggests, in the front part of the brain, right there. And this is the decision-making area of the brain. This is where we weigh out pros and cons and think through situations and scenarios. So it's no wonder then. It's no wonder that addicts have a hard time stopping those unwanted behaviors. It's no wonder that they struggle to kind of overcome those challenges and that addiction in their life, because the part of the brain that's supposed to help them through that and organize it and say, if I do this, it's going to lead to this and this and this, and I don't want that, so I'm going to do this instead. That part of the brain has been altered, changed, rewired. So we're learning more about the brain. And in fact, Valerie Voon over in Cambridge University, she's a friend of ours, and she actually has done a lot of research in comparing drug-addicted brains to pornography and sexual addicted minds. And she said that there are clear differences in the brain activity between patients who have compulsive sexual behavior and healthy volunteers. These differences mirror those of drug addicts. And here's an actual brain scan that she sent us, and you can kind of see the healthy volunteers versus the compulsive pornography users, which is in direct correspondence to the drug addicts. So I've talked to you about how it's impacting the brain, but what's the application of this? How does this then impact us? That desire for more often in a more hardcore version. Well, a friend of mine in Arizona was willing to kind of come out and talk about his challenge. And I wanted you to hear his story, so check it out.
This is my car. Her name is Sheila. She has long, flowing hair. If cars did have hair, she has it.
Sorry, here we go.
This is my car. Her name is Sheila. She has long, flowing hair. If cars did have hair, she has it. And she drives majestically, like a Pegasus. My name is Ryan Hubner. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I am 21 years old, but my beard makes me look like I'm like 37. It's awesome. I live with two of my awesome friends, Justin and TJ. The favorite part of this place is my dyno head. One of my very good friends painted this drum for me, because I'm a drummer and I've been playing drums for like 10 to 11 years. So this is one of my favorite things I have. Right now I play with three of my really good friends and we just kind of jam out and have fun. I love doing it. It's just a passion that I have and that I've had since I've been a young boy. It's a place where really I can be free. I can just be me and not have to worry about the things around me. Back when I was about 10 years old, I was on the internet and I caught one glimpse of pornography. I didn't really know what to feel. For me, there was that slight guilt, but I just justified it by saying, oh, well, it feels great, so I'm just gonna keep looking at it. It just went from one picture to another, and it was just like an endless, vast ocean of sex. Pornography affected the way I thought and behaved. It changed the way I viewed girls. It started to kind of put them as objects of my use. And not only did it do that, but it pornography started to give me that desire to do more, to want more than just pictures and just videos. And that's when I made a dumb decision. When I was 13, I was arrested for touching a girl younger than I was on 2 different occasions. When I was put in that jail cell, it was a terrifying experience. It was just this little tiny, like metal bunk beds jail cell. I didn't know how long I was gonna be in there for either. I was a 13-year-old kid, and it was rough. And so from that moment on, that's where my fight began. No one realizes what this stuff does. I didn't know as a kid growing up. I would have never known. Mentally, like, it just kind of ripped me apart. Now I work with youth, and it's cool to help them fight this pornography battle, because it's not one that's fun to fight alone. I'm 21, and the battle isn't gone, and I don't want to go back. And it's a battle which I'm willing to fight.
Now Ryan's doing a whole lot better today, and it's inspiring to kind of hear those stories. We can kind of see just how much this is impacting individuals of all ages and across the world. I've just talked to you how the brain can be affected, and that can be a pretty depressing message. Your brain can be rewired, and for those of you who have maybe experienced some challenge with pornography in the past and know of individuals who have, you can think to yourself, well, I'm done. My brain's rewired, and I don't get a new one. But the beautiful thing is that we've learned through further neuroscientific studies that our brain is constantly changing even long into our adulthood. And according to what we consume, that brain is constantly adjusting and tweaking. And so we know that the brain can change. We know that the brain can rewire back to a healthy state. And actually, through getting thousands and thousands and thousands of emails from young kids looking for solutions and help, we actually ended up creating what we call the Fortify program online, which is an online help that's free for youth to get the solutions and the help they need to overcome this challenge. In fact, in over 100 countries, we have nearly 30,000 subscribers, and we haven't put a single penny into advertising yet. So this is, again, I'm sad to see that number, that demand. So inspired that they're getting the help that they need and kind of overcoming this. Now, we've talked about the brain, but let's talk about the heart, where the rubber hits the road. This is because, pornography doesn't make our hair fall out or our teeth turn yellow. This is impacting our very capacity to connect and love each other. And so here's an email that we received not long ago, actually very recently, from a kid. He said, I've been trying to fight this for years, and I can't seem to get away. It's ruined nearly 3 relationships. It really has a grasp on me, and I'm not sure how to get away. Eric, age 19. This is definitely impacting our relationships. And there's a kind of this myth out there that it spices up relationships and marriages, and we'll talk more about that, but it's doing quite the opposite. Dr. Norman Deutsch talks a lot about this disordered arousal template, and we have a generation growing up today with an entirely new kind of a disordered and kind of shifted arousal template than generations prior. He says that sexual tastes are molded by an individual's experiences and their culture. These tastes are acquired and then wired into the brain. We are unable to distinguish our second nature from our original nature because of our neuroplastic brains, meaning changeable brains. Once rewired, develop a new nature, every bit as biological as our original. Bottom line, that what we consume actually changes what we prefer and what we desire and what we're interested in. Now, you can kind of think, well, is that such a bad thing? Well, let's talk about how that's impacting a lot of youth today and a lot of individuals. This kid said, please help me. I've been desensitized by porn. The stuff I used to watch no longer works. Now I need violent fantasies. Please, I don't want to be this way. This is a 13-year-old kid. Now I need violent fantasies. I don't want to be this way. A young girl wrote us not long ago. She said, pornography has made me react positively to non-consensual sex and violence against women. So again, it's shifting their sexual and arousal templates. It's altering it so that what they desire and crave becomes a more deviant path, and in many cases, a more violent path of sexuality. And how do you think that's impacting relationships? Committed, loving relationships. It's having a major impact on that. Now, Anna Bridges and Raymond Bergner did a study at the University of Arkansas and the Illinois State University, and they actually gathered 2 groups of individuals. One, they showed pornography to on a regular basis, and the other, they considered their healthy volunteer base, and they analyzed and surveyed them over an extended period of time. They found with almost no exception, that individuals that were regularly consuming pornography, even casually, experienced a significant decrease in the satisfaction that they had in their relationships, primarily their romantic relationships. And so again, that message that it's spicing it up. In a short-term burst, it might give a little bit of a spice to a relationship, but long-term, it's decreasing satisfaction, and it's actually kind of pushing people to prefer the pixels to people, prefer the fantasy to reality. Now, sexual dysfunction, this is an interesting kind of course of studies that we kind of stumbled across and we were able to uncover. But in 1992, when we talk about sexual dysfunction, we're talking about, obviously, male sexual dysfunction. So we're talking about erectile dysfunction and or a lowered libido, so a lessened sex drive. And so in 1992, when did the internet come around? When was that kind of full swing in our society? Any ideas? 1993 to 95, right? That's about when it kind of came full swing. So this is 1992, pre-internet. They found the National Center on Health and Wellness here in the United States did a study, and they found that 5% of men ages 18 to 59 were experiencing some level of sexual dysfunction, okay? And if you dissected that, the vast majority, if not all of them, were from the ages of 50 to 59, okay, that older demographic. Very few young individuals are experiencing this at all. In 2012, so this is where pornography is now, internet is full swing, right? 2012, a Swiss study was done, and they found that 30% of men ages 18 to 25, so they cut the age right in half. 18 to 25 were experiencing some level of sexual dysfunction. And in 2014, last year, a Canadian study was done, and they found that 53.5% of men ages 16 to 21 were experiencing some level of sexual dysfunction. So again, right in line and in parallel with the availability and acceptance of pornography and the accessibility of it, we are seeing a massive increase in sexual dysfunction among men. Now that's got to be like, well, how is that? Many that we've interviewed have said that they are sexual with pornography, but they are unable to be sexual with human beings. Dr. Morgenthaler from the Harvard Medical School said that it's hard to know exactly how many young men are suffering from porn-induced ED, but it's clear that this is a new phenomenon and that it's not rare. So not only is pornography impacting what we love, it's also impacting how much we love, and it's also impacting our ability to express love. And those are three categories that are very important to each one of us. What we love, how much we love, and our ability to express love is literally impacting to the very core of our ability to connect with other human beings. That's pretty messed up. It's pretty messed up. Now, we have a campaign at our organization, for those of you who know about it. It's the Porn Kills Love campaign, the Fight for Love campaign. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Now, this campaign has swept across the world, and we have seen hundreds of thousands and now into the millions of people that have kind of rallied behind this message, and they're spreading the message that porn actually kills love, and that it's impacting our ability to love. And it's inspiring to see that movement grow beyond a little office of kind of crusaders, but beyond it and create an entire movement of people that are trying to change that conversation. And it's inspiring. We'll talk more about that in a second. But I want to share with you a story of Charisse. We often think about this as a male issue. This is a guy's problem. That's not true. 30% of those that consider themselves to be addicted are females. And that number is growing exponentially. And Charisse from New York told us her story. Check it out.
Okay, so this is my cat, White Boy. Is that offensive that I say White Boy? No. Okay. I'm Charisse, and I love traveling, dancing, eating, sleeping, and traveling. I think I said that. I'm a student here in Buffalo at the university. I'm studying social work. I think it's amazing things that people go through and seeing how they get from that point and to a better state. When I first saw porn, I was about 10. It was a picture. I went from seeing the pictures to watching the movies, and that's where it all just kind of got out of control. I think about when I was a little girl and how I used to think about like my first kiss and like holding hands with a guy, and how simple, innocent things like that were so exciting. And what porn did was that it twisted that thinking. It twisted it into thinking that, you know, all this crazy genres and of sex were romantic and were exciting and were fun and were fulfilling, but I really felt empty, and I felt like I was never satisfied. It was just exhausting. It was really exhausting. Even when I was not in front of the computer or whatever, I was thinking about it. I was just, okay, what am I gonna look up later? Everything was clouded by these thoughts and by the images that had been like kind of ingrained in me. Like I couldn't not watch it. I wish that I never went through this. I never wish I saw that first picture. I never wish I watched that first video. I never wanted any of this. So. One day when I was in college, it was a normal day, and I knew I was gonna watch porn, but for the first time I finally like said it out loud. I said, I hate this, I hate porn, I hate doing this, I hate being a slave to this. And after one video, I just kind of broke down. I broke down, and I realized that it wasn't me that was bad, it was the porn. And that was the last day. That was the last day I ever watched porn. It's been about 4.5 years total. I didn't think I was gonna cry. I cry like every day about something, so it's okay. So now I'm much happier. I feel free. I feel like a weight's been lifted off me. But it's still a struggle. I get really easily triggered, I guess you could say. Things just bother me, like certain music, pictures, movies. There's certain things I just don't allow in my life. Life is easier without porn. I can have friends. I can trust people now. I just feel almost complete again.
If you think about the kind of stories you used to watch around individuals that were experiencing sex addiction or pornography addiction, it was often kind of a changed voice, a dark corner, blurred out face. And we're seeing that shift as people are recognizing this is a problem that so many are dealing with, and they want to open up and share their story and who they are. And it's inspiring to kind of be more open about this challenge that has been so secretive for decades and generations. So we talked about the brain, we talked about the heart, let's talk about the world, and Tim's going to talk more about this as well. And I'll just kind of, for the sake of time, kind of scratch the surface of the world. How is this impacting our society? Well, here's an email we got from a kid. He said, my parents don't know how bad it really is. They think that porn is just naked people. Today, porn is much worse than people with no clothes. I was doing a presentation at a university in Arizona, ASU, and a young freshman came up and he said, well, now let's talk about the definition. He's like, now wait a second. Playboy's not porn, is it? And I kind of thought, oh, interesting. Because if I were to ask his parents and many of your parents what pornography is, they would think a bunny. They would think Playboy. That is the icon for pornography, the entire industry, right? And yet today, teens are using it completely. They're using the same word to define something completely differently. And that's what is the big disconnect in our society today. Parents and teens using the same word to define two very vastly different things. Today, porn is much worse than people with no clothes. And technology and advancements in technology and the internet have played a massive role in kind of the acceleration of the material found online. We often talk about the availability, so the kind of the accessibility of this material, right? Just last year alone, one single porn website released their statistics, and they showed that 78 billion videos were streamed from that one website alone last year, more than 11 per person on the planet last year. That's one website. So of course this is being consumed on epic proportions, right? But what we often forget to talk about is that the very nature of that material has changed. It's no longer people with no clothes. is something that far more aggressive, abusive, violent, and challenging. A study was done by Anna Bridges not long ago, and she found that she analyzed 304 of the most popular pornographic films that were released in 2012. So this is mainstream, the most consumed, and they found that 88% of that material was found to be physically aggressive and violent to women and children. Nearly 90% of that content. Who's consuming this? A lot of people are consuming it, as we just kind of illustrated. A lot of people are consuming it, but adolescents, that's the more concerning piece of this. Adolescents are consuming this with no context as to what is natural and normal and fine and healthy. In fact, one young boy was just caught in the front seat of the car with his very first date strangling her. And when they caught him and they said, "What on earth were you doing?" He said, "Isn't that what they want? Isn't that what they like?" So, of course, this is kind of not only shifting an entire generation's sexual and arousal template, but it's really kind of leading to more aggressive behavior because of what they consume. Think back on Norman Deutsch's research. What we consume shifts that interest level and that what we want and what we want to consume. 2 men were just picked up in Miami for doing a 6-year operation where they would kind of lure girls in for a modeling job, and they would drug them, rape them, film it, and sell it to mainstream sites. Many individuals consuming pornography think that this is a victimless thing, right? It's victimless. There's no victim. Not only are they a victim, those that they love are a victim, but the people behind the camera and in front of the camera are victims as well. We had one woman tell us that there was a gun off camera pointed at her head, telling her that if she didn't make it look consensual and that she was agreeing to it, that they would kill her and all of her the other performers. Many individuals think that this is a career choice, and what we're learning is that in many cases, more often than we think, it's not, and they are forced to be there against their will and against their choice. We talk about the porn industry as a separate thing from the sex trafficking industry, as if they were two separate industries. There are conferences for sex trafficking, and everyone gets riled up, and there are conferences for anti-pornographers, and everyone gets riled up, and there are two very vastly different things. Well, what we're learning and what we're starting to connect the dots is that they are actually one industry. They are the sexual exploitation industry. It's two edges of the same cloth. And we need to start recognizing that one fuels the demand for the other to even exist. And Tim's going to talk more about that. But I want to show you this quick little video of a woman that I met in D.C. who told us her story. She wouldn't let me use her face because she thought that she would literally be recaptured by her traffickers. But she shared her story about what she was trafficked into doing and how it's against the mainstream thought.
I speak from experience to say that there are victims and survivors who have been drugged and forced into this ugliness against their wills. I realize that this statement flies in the face of the mainstream mono-thought, stereotypical mentality that porn is something that women choose, or that she likes it, she asked for it, she chose it. Although that might be true for some, many are coerced into agreeing with whatever our pornographer says just to stay alive. I was drugged before each filming. Sometimes it was with an amnesiac, sometimes with a paralyzing drug, sometimes with pain blockers, sometimes a crazy combination of all of them. We lie to cover up the truth. We do not have the words to speak out because our pain is too graphic, and it's next to impossible to describe what happened to us. We're met with dismissals and denials. I'm here to tell you, some of us have succumbed to more drug addictions, some to insanity, some to crippling isolation, and some even to death.
Whoa. How does that make you feel when you hear those stories? Sad, angry, mad, depressed. All those emotions well up inside me when we get emails, when we get reached out by individuals that were at one time performers, and some are still performing, and they are completely, in many cases, trapped. And Tim's doing incredible work to try to get many of the children that are involved in that world out and free. But what we need to comprehend is that, again, the pornography industry, consuming that, is supporting and fueling the demand for the trafficking industry to even exist. It's accelerating that interest level. And this material that is more aggressive, more violent, more abusive than ever before in the history of the world has shaped our societal dialogue around the issue. And a lot of people think it's fine, it's cool, it's normal, it's no big deal. If you stand up against it, you're a prude, you're crazy, you're outdated. And that has shaped our world in a lot of ways. And if we don't do something about it, if we sit idly by, this process will continue as people want more often, and a more hardcore version, and the cycle will continue to get worse and worse. That's the reality. The tidal wave of harm has not yet reached our shores. It's 2 miles out as this generation becomes the deciders, the family leaders, the decision makers, the lawmakers, the policy creators. This is where we've got to make a change. And it starts with us. I believe that we can make this change. I've dedicated my life to the idea that we can make this change. And it starts with us rejecting pornography. Thank you. Thank you. It starts with us rejecting pornography and what it stands for and what it's trying to teach us. And then it'll not only shape our attitude, but those around us and our peers' attitude to think it's not cool, it's not normal, it's not fine, that's not okay, which will then in turn change our world. I know it sounds grandiose, but it's possible. And we're seeing it across the world in communities all over. And it starts with us. So if you're on board with this mission, if you're down with this cause, we need you to help change the conversation, to help shape this dialogue. The thing is that your generation, the millennial generation, is more inspired and motivated by social change and cultural change than anything else, more than money. And upon your backs, we will change the world. But upon our backs, we can change the world, and we're poised for it. But not only perhaps are we the most kind of cause-driven and social-changing generation that's been recorded, we're also the most skeptical. And that's a challenge. In fact, they've been studying trust among generations for a long time, and they found that the millennial generation in particular is the least trusting of all time. Today, they trust only two things, according to what this survey says: the military and science. So luckily, science has caught up with truth. The language that is required to reach out and inspire this generation is here. We can use it, and we must use it. It's no longer a personal opinion and only perhaps a belief system, but it's also backed up by science and research, and we need to leverage that. We need to leverage it to help inspire a generation to go out and change a conversation from "dude, check this out" to "dude, that's not cool. I don't want that." And help educate those around them to do so. Now, if we take this research, this science and research, and we combine it with viral marketing and storytelling, and we will then be able to mobilize a community, and that mobilization of a community with that DNA will be able to be the solution that we're looking for. And I know this is immensely simplified, but this is the process that we're taking across the world, and we're changing lives. Now, Socrates said that the secret to change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. This is just not fighting negative with negative. Here are the harms, but what are we talking about? What is the new that we're pushing people toward? What do you think that is? What could that be? There's a lot of messages that we can be pursuing and pushing and leveraging. A lot of messages that we do on our social media and that you guys do in your dialogues and conversations with others. The message that we need to take to the world is that not only does porn kill love, but we need to fight for love. And that pornography is the exact counterfeit and antithesis to that very love that we all need and want in our lives. Love takes two people over pixels. And fight for love. That is the message. Love is at the foundation of this, and it's impacting that very core biological desire for love. Now, we have a billboard campaign in the Bay Area going on right now. We have over 100 billboards. Yes. Yes. We have 100 billboards out right now that are promoting this message that porn kills love and to fight for love. And you wouldn't imagine, I don't know if some of you are from that area, but you wouldn't imagine the kind of the dialogue gets stirring up in that area. You can imagine. It's like sticking a stick into a beehive. We're really stirring up a dialogue, which is what we intended to do, and we're learning from it, and we're inspiring others to kind of start that conversation. Again, change the conversation, change the world. So I want to end with our story. And many of you have your own story. And as you watch this, I want you to think of your own story as you pursue your efforts to change the world. You're the emerging leaders of this world. And as you kind of go out and enter the world and try to change the world in a number of different categories and issues and concerns of our society, you all have a story. And and stories can change the world. And you need to tell your story. You need to leverage your story and those of others to help change the world. This is ours. Check it out.
This all started when we met in college. Just a few guys sharing a simple desire to one day make an impact on the world. In many of our discussions together, it quickly became apparent that we'd all been affected in one way or another by one thing: pornography. Either in our own lives or in the lives of our friends, family members, or just people we knew. We were surprised, actually, by the amount of differing opinions on the issue. And we knew that this was a subject that most people just didn't want to talk about. I mean, when was the last time you had a nice dinner conversation about the good old topic of porn? Yeah, it just doesn't happen, right? So we started looking into the subject and found science and research proving its harm. And we realized that there was a legitimate epidemic growing in our society. We knew it had to start somewhere. A year later, armed with nothing but passion and an idea, we started building our movement like anybody would, by launching a Facebook page. Thus began our grassroots campaign to raise awareness on the harmful effects of pornography using only science, facts, and personal accounts. Backed by a tidal wave of new information, this movement has spread across the globe and back again. It has taken us places we'd never thought we'd go, and we couldn't be more stoked about it. We are artists, writers, designers, filmmakers, and storytellers who have made it our life's focus to raise awareness on the harmful effects of porn on the brain, relationships, and society as a whole. A shift in society now has people fighting for real love and shunning its whole counterfeits. People are connecting, tuning in, and taking a stand against this harmful material and choosing to live a life of true freedom, real love, and untainted passion. Our strength lies in being bold, loving, open-minded, and genuine. We are disruptors. We are rebels. We are fighters. What started off as just a few college kids with an idea is now changing the conversation from, dude, check this out, to, dude, that's not cool. So, are you in? Join the movement and become a fighter.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for hanging around. I'm just so honored to share this stage with Clay and Fight the New Drug. People always ask us when we go around, what is going on? Why are there 2 million children? And that number is low. Why are there 2 million children who are forced into the commercial sex trade? And the answer is because there's that many sick people on earth that want that. And that was a hard concept for me to even understand and believe. I'm not a millennial, but I have a hard time believing too, sometimes. How can that be real? There's that many kids, and I'm not even talking the adults. There's that many kids who are stuck in this. And I'm going to tell you my story about how I came to discover the evils of slavery and children in this slavery and sex trafficking, because we need to know it's real. But when people ask me, why is it happening? I say, because there are that many, like I said, there's that many sick people addicted to this drug called pornography. I spent 12 years working as a government agent, working almost exclusively child crimes cases. And every single time I'd interrogate these guys, it was the same story every single time when they broke. And almost all of them eventually broke. And they'd say, it started when I was 12 years old and I picked up my dad's Playboy, or my uncle's Playboy, or the kid who showed me the naked picture. And that's where it began. And I didn't have the science to catch up. I was learning the truth kind of anecdotally. And so I was so grateful when I got this science to prove what I was seeing. And they talk about how they go through this progression, or degression is what it is. They talk about how the adult legal stuff just wasn't doing it for them anymore. They weren't getting the dopamine release, the chemical reaction that they wanted. Just like marijuana users, eventually, if they're not getting that kick anymore, they need to go into something more serious. That's what they were doing with pornography. And when the adult legal stuff wasn't doing it for them, they thought, I gotta do something. I've got to get that reaction. I need that dopamine release. What if I looked at children? And then they begin looking at children. And some of these guys can't believe that they're doing it as they're doing it. They can't believe they've gotten to this point. But that's what their addiction has led them to. And then pretty soon after that, they end up wanting more. They want to abuse those children. And that's why we have over 2 million children forced into the commercial sex trade today. The fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world is the trafficking of human beings. If you add the adults and if you add the slave labor, which really they go hand in hand, you're talking about more than 50 million people in slavery today. Now we talk about history, we talk about slavery, but that's in history class, right? Because slavery's in the past. We got rid of that. Right? The Emancipation Proclamation and all that stuff. We got rid of slavery. We fought that war. Did you know that there are more slaves in existence today, living right now, than if you added up all the slaves over 350 years of the transatlantic slave trade? There's more living today. Slave labor, sex slavery, it's everywhere. And I'm grateful that you're here even listening. Because one of the problems is people don't want to listen. They don't want to see this. It's easier not to see it. And again, going back to history. How in this country, in this blessed land, even where the settlers and founders believed it was a God-centered place and a covenant land, how did we let slavery, this horrible thing, people owning people, exist for so long here? The answer, if you read the history, they didn't want to look. Half the country that wasn't doing it didn't want to look at it. They turned away. Most people in the northern states, they didn't visit the southern states any more than you and I visit Mexico or Thailand. And so you see the parallels? It's just as easy, it was just as easy for them to turn a blind eye as it is for us to turn a blind eye to where this is going on all over the world. And that's not to say it's not happening here, because it is. The State Department estimates that 10,000 children, this number would be doubled or more with adults, but children are smuggled into the United States every year and forced into the commercial sex trade. It's estimated that there's over 100,000 children currently forced into the commercial sex trade. And these kids need help. At the end of the day, this is the dark end of what Clay just talked about, right? This is where it leads to. It leads to a whole bunch of difficult things. This is one of the worst things it leads to. The most innocent in our society being abused in the most vile of ways that I can't even describe to you. I wouldn't even begin to describe to you the things that I have had to look at and be exposed to. And it's so incredibly devastating. So my goal tonight or today is to get you to cross over and be converted to this cause of emancipation, emancipating slaves, because it's with numbers that we can do something about this. Thank you. Yeah. One of my great heroes of American history is a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe. You guys have heard of Harriet Beecher Stowe? So again, I love these historical parallels where she was one of those northern people that lived in the 19th century and thought life was pretty good. She lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. She crossed the river into slave territory one day and couldn't believe what she saw. She walked into, almost accidentally, into a plantation, into slavery. And she came home and she said, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe I didn't know this was happening. And she decided to do something about it. And what she could do was write. And so she wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. That book spread like wildfire. In fact, her son reported that when she met Abraham Lincoln for the first time during the Civil War, he bent down and shook her hand and said, so you're the little lady who started this war. And there was truth to that. That's what she was able to do. And until people knew that the evils existed in their world, nothing happened. The government, make no mistake, the government didn't eradicate slavery. Yes, on paper they did. But they could have done that years before. It was the people who rose up because of the influence of Harriet Beecher Stowe and others. It's the people who rose up and said, we will not live on this earth any longer while this is happening and do nothing. And they did something. And so that's what we want to do, is create this movement. And really it's the same movement that Clay, it's the same movement. It's all the same thing. It's fighting this evil. It's fighting this eternal war that's been going on since before the world was, and liberating people. So my invitation is, at the end of this, is cross over that river with us. I crossed over, not because I didn't do it heroically. I didn't want to do it. When I signed up with the U.S. government, I wanted to investigate terrorism. I wanted to investigate money launderers. I wanted to investigate drug traffickers. And that's what I did for the first 6 months until they called me in and they said, hey, we're starting, this was early 2000s, we're starting a child trafficking unit. And we'd like you to help us do it. I said, no, I won't do that. Because I was just like the northern states, right? In the 19th century, I don't want to look. I don't want to have anything to do with this. I promised my wife I wouldn't ever get into this one area. And fortunately for me, it was the one area that you couldn't be forced to work. And so I went home that night and I said, I told my wife, you won't believe what they just asked me to do. Our biggest nightmare professionally. They asked me to do this, but don't worry. I said, I did tell him, just so he thought I was going to think about it. I told him I'd come back and tell him tomorrow. And she said, well, of course you're going to say no. I'm like, yeah, because we already talked about this. So in the morning, I get up and I'm getting ready. I'm a little nervous. I gotta confront this guy, Larry Frost. He's about 6'4", big white mustache, cowboy hat, a little intimidating. And I got to tell him no. And as I'm walking out, my wife grabs me and she says, and she was, oh my goodness, she was vehement the night before, like mad that someone even asked me to do this. And by the next day, she grabs me and she says, you have to say yes. And I was like, what? She's like, you have to say yes. And the reason her biggest fear was, we have children, and how will that affect our kids if you're out exposed to things? And I don't want to lose you as a father and a husband. And before I left the house, she said, you have to, because for the same reason I thought that you couldn't do it is the reason you have to do it, because we have children. We know what innocence is, and if this is really happening. And frankly, I didn't even believe it was really happening to the extent they were telling me. And so I said, okay. So I went in and said yes, cautiously. And the first real case that I worked was the moment I think I crossed over the river and became converted. It was a little boy who, along with 12 other kids, was being trafficked from Mexico, kidnapped, trafficked from Mexico, back and forth, being abused by a porn addict, and a very wealthy one who could afford to do this. And you can Google the guy. His name's Earl Buchanan. You can Google him and read the story. He's in jail and will be for the rest of his life, thank goodness. Yeah. So this little boy, we saw that this guy made, like a lot of pornographers do when they get to that level of addiction, he's making his own. And he would make pornography of him abusing children. And we came across one of these videos of this little boy. And he was 5 years old. And unspeakable things were being done to him by this monster, Earl Buchanan. And through a miracle, really, and through some amazing border agents, they identified this van. It was interesting. They didn't have any reason to put it in secondary. The guy just said, the officers later said, I don't know why, something inside told me, send this van to secondary. Because if you're on the border, cars are coming through real fast. Sure enough, it was him, and he had that little boy in the back of the van. And I didn't do anything great on that case except just show up with everybody else and start investigating. But I happened to be the first to see the little boy. And right when I saw him, I reviewed the video. I knew that little kid from the video. And there he was, standing in front of me. And kind of inherently knew we were the good guys, and jumped into my arms and just held me and just shook. I can remember it so vividly. He just shook. And I remember being surprised that though kidnapped in Mexico, but because this man had controlled him since he was a baby, he spoke perfect English. And he just said one sentence. He said, I don't belong here. And of course, I just totally fell apart. I could not hold it in. I just wept, and as I held this little kid. And that was a July 3rd. The next day was July 4th, and it was a very memorable day. I don't think it was a coincidence. To me, it wasn't a coincidence that it was his Independence Day when we were able to go to this guy's house in San Bernardino, California, right here in our country, where he had the other 11 kids. And he kept them inside. He had built a house inside a warehouse. And inside that house, he had closed circuit cameras, pornography mixed with toys, and he threw the kids in there, and that's where he did his abuse. And we were able to pull them all out and get them to safety on July 4th. So, yeah. Thank you. So that's when I knew that this is what I had to do. I had to do this because there were more kids out there. And so I continued working in this job for over a decade, and then they started sending me overseas to look for Americans who were traveling. These are the Americans who didn't see Clay's presentation, right? And they let themselves go down this path, and they're traveling, and it got so bad that these travelers going and abusing children overseas, that the U.S. government in the mid-2000s decided to write something into law in the Adam Walsh Child Protect Act that said that U.S. authorities can now investigate Americans who are overseas. And if they abuse a child overseas that way, we can hold them accountable as if they did it here. It was an amazing law, awesome law. Of course, they still had to prove that there was enough nexus back to the United States in his dealings and in his travelings and so forth. But they sent us out to go find these guys. And they sent us out undercover to pretend that we were either traffickers of children or that we were travel agents who would actually bring people on tours. Here in Utah, a lot of people take tours into Central America. And I always warn them, I said, hey, if you go on one of those tours and you look up and I'm your tour guide, just get out of that tour real fast, because it's going to end bad, I promise. But we would do that. We would take, pretend to be in these roles so we could get these guys. And that's when this number became such a reality to me. It hit home. These kids are being sold everywhere. They're harder to find here in the U.S., but they're here too. But in other countries where they don't have as powerful law enforcement resources or even political will, and where there's a lot of poverty, you wouldn't believe what's going on. We'd find kids being sold on 11, 12-year-old girls. Just see those three? I'll sell them to you right now for 3 hours. $500, you can go. Everywhere. And so I became very frustrated when I couldn't find that nexus back to the U.S. For example, I couldn't find the American, but we wanted to rescue the kids. And I was told no again and again. You can't investigate that case. You can't pursue that case. Because is it going to end in a U.S. courtroom or a Mexican courtroom? And I said, I don't care where it ends. We have to get these kids out. And to no fault of my bosses, they were just following the laws and the statutes and everything else. And I got to the point where we became so frustrated that I thought there has to be something else we can do. There has to be something else we can do. We can't just let governments alone deal with this problem. It's too big of a problem for any one government or any one group. There has to be something we can do. And so I got this idea. What if I left the government and started a private organization that will allow us the flexibility to just go regardless of the jurisdiction or regardless of who has what nexus, but we can plug in two law enforcement systems. We always work with the governments. We never go around them. But go to these law enforcement people, find the ones that we can vet through our embassies and through our contacts who we know are trustworthy prosecutors, trustworthy law enforcement, and I knew a lot of them because I'd worked with them for so long, and go with them and give them what they need. Be those Americans who are unfortunately the ones who are traveling to do this, and help them, support them, and liberate these kids who didn't have hope of liberation. The other thing I realized we could do, drawing back on my love of history, is we could get people involved. Right now, people don't know what's going on. And again, like I said about slavery in America, it wasn't the government that just woke up one day and said, let's do something. It was the people who rose up. And I thought this could be a way we can bring the people on board. And we could share our stories with them. And they could do something about this. And so we launched Operation Underground Railroad. And it's something I want to mention about people getting on board. One of those people, you guys heard of a guy named Jerry Mullen? Anyone heard that name? If you don't know the name, you'll know the work. He won an Oscar for Schindler's List. He was the producer of Schindler's List. Also did Jurassic Park and a bunch of other movies that you would recognize. Well, he's here. Is he here today? Is he happen to be in here? Jerry, you here? Jerry's here at the, what's that? Okay, so he's here, and find him, and I'm going to tell you how you can find him. He came to me early on, even before we had launched out and before I had even left the government. He heard through a coincidence, through just a fortunate coincidence that I was thinking about doing this, and he came to me, and this man he is the most unbelievable guy. Sweetest man on earth. You just talk to him. And he said to me, I hear you're going to do this thing. And I said, yeah. You know, are you going to tell me I'm nuts like everyone else has told me? And he says, no. He said, you know, when we made Schindler's List, we were overwhelmed at what happened. We were overwhelmed at the response. People did not know what had happened during the Holocaust. And it got people mobilized and excited to make sure this never happened again. And our one regret was that we couldn't have made Schindler's List in 1942. We couldn't have imagine if we could have made Schindler's List while it was happening. How many lives we would have saved. Because people would rise up and they would not let this happen. And he says, Tim, we have an opportunity right here to make the Schindler's List of this problem while it's happening. He said, let me send a crew and follow you around and shine a light into this darkness. And so I realized this is Harriet Beecher Stowe right here in the form of Jerry Mullen. And we said, okay, you can do it. And they've been following us around ever since. We've been in existence for about 1.5 years, and we've already had the blessing and privilege to help over 300 victims get physically removed from this. Thank you. But more importantly, there's probably tens of thousands who never knew they were going to be trafficked because their would-be traffickers are in jail. We have over 100 traffickers in jail from our operations right now. So, and what's interesting is all of those operations are on film. And the first 3, they put into a documentary, this film, and it's called The Abolitionist. And I just found out that Jerry made some phone calls, and they're going to be doing a very special screening today at 5 o'clock in the Grand America. It's at the Forum Rooms. Does that make sense? So find the Forum Rooms, be there a little before 5. I think they're going to show it in 3 different rooms, is what they're telling me. So please come and watch that. And there's going to be a theatrical release of that in March, I believe. So as we decided we should try to go private, going back, in December 2013, the first place I bought tickets to were to Colombia. And the reason why was because that was one of the places that I had been working, but wasn't able to finish the job. The U.S. government had asked me to go down and work with Colombian officials to train them on how to identify child traffickers and children. And I'd done so many of these trainings, and I was so tired of just kind of check the box, okay, let's go home. And so I had these Colombian officials in front of me, and I just closed the manual, and I said, you know what, let's not do this. Let's do a case. And I was very naive doing this. It was just kind of spontaneous, and I overpromised them. I said, let's do a case. Let's save kids. Let's end this training with saving kids. Let's learn by doing. And they all got excited, and we put together this plan. It was going to start in Cartagena, Colombia, and here's how we do it. We put it all together. And I said, okay, I'll be back. I'll be back with my team, and we'll be the Americans who travel and all this. So I go back home, and of course, I knew better. When I said I need to go back, they said, where's the American? Where are the Americans? I said, well, we'll find them on the back end, I promise. This problem's so intertwined, we'll find them on the back end. And they said, no, you're not going. We're not going to do that. And so I had to call my Colombian friends and say, I'm sorry, I can't come finish that training. And so the first place I went was back to Colombia to fulfill that promise. And what resulted was something beyond my wildest dreams. It culminated in an operation that rescued 120 victims in 1 hour. What we did was we set up thank you. What we did was we set up sting operations in 3 different cities, in Medellin, Armenia, Colombia, and Cartagena, Colombia, on a little island. And we got all the local traffickers interested in bringing all the kids under their control to this party, thinking that, of course, their ship just came in. All these American perverts have come down into town, and we're gonna provide them what they want. And what we learned about this organization, the one I was in Cartagena, how they operated was they had actually hired a pageant queen, a beauty queen from Cartagena, a 24-year-old beautiful woman who was their recruiter. And she would go around, and she said, they told us, and the reason they told us all this is because we were telling them that if this party went well, we're going to invest over $1 million in building their dream. And their dream was to build a hotel out on these islands. It's called Baru Islands off of Cartagena. Beautiful Caribbean resort type thing, but very kind of primitive still. They were going to build this hotel that was a child sex brothel because they had so many kids they had recruited. And how they recruited them was similar to the case in Florida that Clay was talking about. This woman would go out and target these kids at 9 years old and offer them scholarships to come learn how to be a model and teach them the tricks of the trade, when in fact they were grooming them and desensitizing them, showing them pornography, getting them drugged on that drug, and desensitizing them and telling them part of this job is you're going to go service these men who come in after class. Some of the kids were lured out of their homes. Their parents thought that they were going to school, and then they were threatened. Don't tell your family what you're really doing, so forth. There's, in that one case, there was 55 victims. Most were children. The youngest ones were 11 years old. By the time, because it takes them 2 years to get groomed and trained. During this operation, they had 4 of the girls who were just graduated from this program that they had, this evil thing, and they were virgins, and they were going to sell them for $1,000 to us for the party, and to show us also, here's how much money you can make when they're virgins. And we're sitting there just smiling across the table from these guys and dealing and wheeling and dealing, and everything, of course, is being recorded. We have Colombian police all around undercover with us. And these little kids crying, some of them, the youngest ones for sure, just tears in their eyes as he's selling them to us. And us not being able to just immediately say, we're not bad. You're done. This is gonna end and you're going home. I want to show you a quick clip of what happened in that operation. And by the way, as he's setting it up, guess what happened at the end? So remember, I couldn't go down because there were no Americans. But once I was down there, I will say that the U.S. Embassy helped tremendously. They just couldn't, I couldn't have launched this as an agent from the States, but the embassy was actually very instrumental once we were there and started creating this, bringing in resources and making sure we connected with the right people. And one of the guys, we had kind of sent this, we sent on social media, in the dark places on social media, we had sent invitations to those who otherwise, who we identified on Facebook and other places who traveled to Colombia to engage in this with children. And some of these guys took the invitation. They were coming down to the party. And we were able to have them arrested before they even got on an airplane. So we ended up getting our Americans in the end. Is it coming up? I'll answer this question because it's always an important one. What happens to the kids afterwards? That's the most important part. We work with organizations, private and public, and we partner with them before we even do the operation to make sure there's a place for them. Unfortunately, and this is a hard thing to hear, about half of the kids, the parents actually know about it, and they're on the take, if you can believe that. It's something that's incomprehensible to most of us, but that's the sad reality. And so we have to find places for these kids to be healed. Safe houses, rehabilitation facilities. The organization in Colombia that we worked with and still work with is called Renacer. And they have the psychological and all the educational and medical treatment to help these kids in their healing. Yes, so the parents get investigated. Those who knew, of course, they start getting investigated, and they have ended up themselves in prison often. Oftentimes, there's not enough evidence about how much they knew, what exactly they knew. It's often broken families, very impoverished families, and so it's difficult to discover exactly what they knew. Yes? Right. Great question. So the question was, do these kids come back to the U.S.? We are working on ways. There's visa issues and cultural issues to get around. We are working on several plans right now to try to see if that can happen. In the meantime, we are supporting the rehabilitation side of things. A lot of you know Ed Smart, the father of Elizabeth Smart, who we work closely with Ed and the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. Ed's our director of rehabilitation, so he does a lot of work to make sure we're partnering with the right people, organizations, so these kids have a place to go and be healed. Thank you. Are we up? Okay, so this is a clip from CBS News about the operation I just described to you.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Perry.
Dozens of children were saved from slavery when agents rushed in to break up a sex trafficking ring. Last weekend, police broke up a major sex trafficking ring in Colombia, which has become a destination for tourists looking for sex with boys and girls. The police had help from an American who went undercover to rescue the children, and Elaine Quijano met him.
Tim Ballard has one mission: to track down child traffickers. 4 months ago, Colombian authorities asked him to investigate a tip that children were being sold there as sex slaves.
Within a half hour, this individual walks up to me, starts asking me what I'm here for, what I want, and within minutes, he says, well, I've got kids as young as 11 years old.
Ballard, a former Homeland Security agent, now heads up Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit group that rescues trafficked kids. After that first meeting, the Colombians asked him to put together a sting.
No men will be in here, only women.
Operation Underground Railroad spent months planning, renting this house, rigging it with hidden cameras to document the crime, coordinating with Colombian authorities, and negotiating with the traffickers.
How they find these kids is they lure them in by pretending to have a modeling agency. They target them at 9 or 10 years old. And they were telling us that about by 11, they're ready for sex. They're ready to be sold.
What is that like, looking into that kind of person's eyes?
It's horrifying, and this is why. Because I've got a smile in the face of evil. This is the table where we're going to do the negotiation.
Less than 24 hours after the operatives landed, the suspected traffickers arrived on the island, and the final deal with the undercover team began. 54 boys and girls aged 11 to 18 were ushered in for what had been billed as a sex party. They were given candy and drinks and told to wait in this small room.
This little 11-year-old boy, I remember, he asked one of my operatives if they could give him some cocaine or something. He said, they usually give me something because I'm really scared.
By the time the deal was done, the alleged traffickers were set to make $25,000. That transaction was never completed. 25 Colombian special operatives stormed the party, arresting 5 suspects, 4 men and 1 former beauty queen, all charged with child trafficking. The victims, 29 of whom are under 18, were evacuated, given medical exams, and placed in a rehabilitation center where specialists are working to undo the damage.
Right before I got on the boat, we had to walk by this room where the kids were, and they put their hand up. And I touched their hand and see that there's liberation now.
Liberating one child at a time. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, New York.
And we'll be...
Thank you so much. This clip makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I get undue credit as the face of the organization. The real heroes are my team, who I can't show you, who are the guys making all this happen, the Colombian agents who, without them, there would be nothing. And what's so great about what happened after this, after we left, the Colombians, using that model, continued rescuing kids without us. And still consult. Yeah, that's the goal. And then later, and you'll see this in the film tonight if you can go see it, we walked back into the streets of Colombia, the same places where vendors would introduce us to the traffickers to make a deal like this. And every time the subject came up of kids being sold, everybody was saying, I can't even, you're in the wrong place. Don't you watch the news, man? Haven't you seen what's going on? Those Americans that all got arrested? And he has no idea who he's talking to. I was one of the guys in handcuffs, getting pulled out. And he said, you can't do that here. No one's going to do that. And I thought, and I turned to the Colombian agent. We walked away. He had tears in his eyes. And he said, this is working. He said, we just got to keep doing it. You create this deterrent. We're saving thousands now that never knew they needed to be saved. This operation, you might have heard of this. So the Attorney General of Utah, Sean Reyes, he came with us on this operation. You have an amazing person as your Attorney General, those of you who are from Utah. He knows it's a problem here. He had done a lot of work here already, but he wanted to see it up close and personal so he could be even more effective. And he asked, could I come? No spotlights. We kind of snuck him in. And he sat face to face, feet away from that deal, and watched it happen, participated in it. We trained him up. He speaks Spanish. It was great. He was playing the role of the bodyguard. He was very trained, I promise you. And people worry that it was wonderful, and he became one of the great witnesses. He's become one of the great witnesses of our day about modern day slavery. He's been asked to testify before Congress, debrief all sorts of officials, work on legislation, even on the national level. So, and this is what we need everyone to do is get on board, just like the Attorney General did. And we invite you all to cross the river and get on board. And it really is I'm so thrilled to be sharing this stage, like I said, with Clay, because it's a 1-2 punch. Too many have gone too far down the path that we unfortunately need to go rescue them and pull them back, the victims of this. But if everybody on earth knew the science that Clay and his team are spreading, there would be no demand, or there would be a significantly less demand. So we invite you, and Clay and I both, get on our teams. It's a 1-2 punch. We both need to be, and I'm so proud every time when people ask me these questions, and I'm like, yeah, there's a group that does that. It's called Fight the New Drug. And we both happen to be from the same great state of Utah. And that's just another coincidence. That's just, it makes me proud to be from here. Yes?
So what can we do?
What can you do? You can get behind, well, there's so many things to do. If you go to our website, and Clay's website, fightthenewdrug.org, and OURrescue.org, we have a slew of ways people can get involved. Obviously, the more resources we have, the more we can move the ball forward. But that's not the only thing that we need. Social media, spread the word. And not just about our organization, but if more people are just talking about it and sharing the science and sharing the stories that we can provide on our website, then governments, we hope, will move. Other governments, other organizations, people will stand up and say, we're not going to let this happen. So that would be the call to action. Just get on both those websites, and they'll tell you what you can do to support both of these organizations. Yes, sir.
One thing is, you're in the media quite a bit now.
Yes.
You're coming out with the movie. I'm wondering about your own personal safety.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for being concerned, yeah.
How do you keep your cover against all of this attention?
Yeah, so the answer to that is, the question was, how do I keep my cover with my face being exposed on CBS and other places? So I can't really go undercover anymore because of that. And once my guys kind of come out in media, then it's kind of a revolving door of operators who do this. I say not really because I keep telling my wife I'm not going to go undercover anymore. But then I keep meeting these like makeup artists and that have all sorts of cool things, and it's like it really changes everything. And so I still sometimes dabble in undercover work, but for the most part, I don't. At least I have to say I don't, because I'm trying to get life insurance, and no one will insure me. So if you talk to my life insurance agent, you can tell him I'm at a desk now all the time. So that's a true story. No one will insure me. If anyone knows any insurance people out there, we're working on it. Just last week, do I have a couple minutes? Or I think but just last week we were in India, and you wouldn't believe what we found. It's called Operation Trapdoor in Mumbai. We found these kids. Just show it. Okay. I don't think we have time anyway. I think we're out of time, but okay. Well, let me just, as he's pulling it up, these women and children who had been trafficked into these nightclubs, and it was 4 different nightclubs, and they kept these kids locked away. So we sent operators in there. We work with an unbelievable organization that we've partnered with called India Rescue Mission, and we go into these places and watch these people, these women and children being sold, but we were noticing that they wouldn't leave. We did surveillance for weeks on these places, and they never left. And so we hung out and did some more surveillance and more investigative work and found out they were keeping these kids behind the drywall. There was trap doors. They'd make them service their clients, and then they'd shove them in this wall, behind the wall, close the door, and they were living in a space about as wide as this hallway, with no bed, not even bedding. They just throw them water and some food and say, when we open the trap door, you better get out here. And this is the reality for millions and millions of people being abused by sex addicts. Yes.